My son was just walking home from school, backpack on, headphones in, when Karen stopped him on the sidewalk and said he looked like a criminal. He's 12, gets straight A's, plays violin. So I made sure the whole town knew exactly who she insulted and who she really was. Tell me where you're watching from now. Let's get into the story. Asterisk, you try to raise your kids right. That's the thought that sat heavy in my chest the moment I saw my son come through the door that afternoon, backpack slung over one shoulder, chin tucked down, and that quiet look in his eyes he only gets when something's gone wrong. But he's trying not to make a fuss. He's 12, smart as a whip, kind to a fault, and if there's ever been a boy more polite, I haven't met him. He says yes ma'am without being told, takes his dishes to the sink, and carries his little sister's school bag every morning to the bus stop. He plays violin, keeps a notebook full of poetry he'd rather no one know about, and the biggest rebellion he's ever pulled was sneaking an extra cookie before dinner. So when I saw him walk in like that, quiet, distant, I knew something had happened, something real. And deep down, I already had a feeling who might have been behind it. See, there's a woman in our neighborhood, goes by Karen, though I doubt that's her birth name. She's the type who watches the world like it personally offended her. Always got something to complain about. The grass is too long, the music too loud, the children too rowdy, the air too humid. And if it's none of those, she'll find something else. I've lived long enough to know that misery has sharp eyes and plenty of time. She moved in 2 years back when the HOA started bringing in more modern-minded folks. Our community's always been quiet, built more on handshakes than rules. But the new board wanted gates and surveillance cameras and a certain standard. You can guess what that really meant. Karen fit right in with their way of thinking. She's got that look-tight smile, expensive haircut, eyes that scan people up and down like they're grocery items on the wrong shelf. She never talks to you, she talks at you. I'd had a few run-ins before, nothing major. Mostly noise about my mailbox being rustic or my porch light being too yellow. Trivial stuff. But now she'd set her sights on my boy. He had taken the long way home from school that day, walking past the community center and up Maple Drive, her street. It's not a thing unusual about it. We've walked that route together plenty of times. It's lined with maple trees, old brick sidewalks, and those manicured lawns the HOA likes to brag about in the monthly newsletter. It's peaceful, or at least it used to be. He was wearing a hoodie, a navy blue one with the school emblem on it, same one they sell at the PTA fundraiser every year. His hands were in his pockets, and his earbuds were in violin music, probably playing. That's how he decompresses after class. That's the music play while he watches squirrels hop across the lawns or counts how many dogs he sees on the walk. But apparently that was enough to make Karen uncomfortable. Now, she didn't say anything to me directly, not at first. That's not her way. Instead, the HOA app pinged me with a concern. It came with a timestamped security cam still frame my son, frozen mid-step on the sidewalk, not even on her lawn. The note read, "Suspicious individual observed near private property. Please speak with your household members about proper community conduct." They didn't even call him a child. It's just suspicious individual. It takes a special kind of cowardice to hide behind official language when you're targeting a kid. I sat on that message for a while. Tried to breathe. Tried to tell myself it was just another HOA overstep. Another misunderstanding. But the thing that gnawed at me wasn't the text hit, was my son's face when he came home. That look of quiet shame, like he wasn't sure what he'd done wrong but felt guilty anyway. That's the part that stuck. That's what made my stomach twist in a way no grown man should ignore. Because I've lived long enough to see how this plays out. I've seen the way some folks look at boys like mine when they stop being cute and start being concerning. The same boy who used to sell lemonade out front and wave at joggers now gets cross sidewalks and hushed tones just because he grew taller. Or maybe because his skin tone isn't what some folks want in their neighborhood scrapbook. It's one thing to judge a man unfairly. We learn to live with that. But going after a child, that's where I draw the line. There's a reason rural folks don't react fast. It's not because we're slow. It's because we take our time thinking. We know the land teaches patience. Crops don't grow overnight, and justice shouldn't either. So I didn't stomp over to her porch or scream in the comment section like she probably expected. I just watched, observed, took in the full picture like I was walking the edge of my property line, counting every rotten fence post. I saw how she behaved at HOA meetings, always the first to report anything she didn't like, but never the one to show up when the food pantry needed volunteers. I saw how she posted cheery community pride photos online, but never once acknowledged the diverse families living 2 houses down. And I saw, most of all, how she treated children like stray dogs in her flower bed, tolerated only when quiet and out of sight. Well, my son isn't a stray. He's mine. And I don't raise invisible children, so I made a decision. Not loud, not quick. Just a quiet commitment in my chest that said, you don't get to do this to him without consequences. And if Karen wanted to make assumptions based on appearances, well, he was going to give the whole town a very different picture to look at. There are moments in a parent's life that get seared into memory. You don't choose them. They brand you. Like the first time you hear your child cry, or the last time they reach for your hand without thinking. But this was different. This was the kind of moment that scorches you, not with pride or joy, but with helpless, hot fury. It happened 2 days after that HOA message, the one that called my son a suspicious individual. I'd hoped maybe that was the end of it, that maybe Karen had gotten whatever twisted satisfaction she needed by filing her little complaint and shuffling back behind her blinds like the self-appointed neighborhood warden she was. But I should have known better. Folks like her don't just let things go, especially when their pride's involved. It was a Friday. Clear skies, just a whisper of breeze through the maples, and the kind of golden light that makes the street look like a postcard. The kind of afternoon that should have meant nothing more than kids kicking around soccer balls and neighbors chatting over fences. Instead, it turned into something ugly. My boy had decided to take the same route home. I didn't ask him to. Maybe he wanted to prove something to himself, that he wasn't scared, that one woman's ignorance wasn't going to dictate the way he moved through his own neighborhood. Maybe he just liked the quiet of that block. Whatever the reason, I respected it. That kind of courage doesn't come easy. He was walking with his backpack, earbuds in again, hoodie off this time, whether by coincidence or intent, I don't know. Head high, shoulders back, trying, I imagine, to reclaim something that had been quietly taken from him just a few days before. And that's when Karen stepped outside. Now, I didn't witness it firsthand, but you don't need security footage to see what happened. He told me later, but even before he spoke a word, I could read it all over him when he came home, face pale, fingers trembling just enough to notice, lips pressed tight like he was trying to hold in something bigger than he could contain. She didn't just glare at him this time. She spoke, loud enough for him to hear. Loud enough, I suspect, for the cameras she lobbied so hard for to pick up her words. And what she said wasn't just rude or condescending. It was deliberate, cruel, accusatory. She called him a threat, a neighborhood threat. 12 years old, still sleeps with a reading lamp on, scared of thunderstorms. Can't even open a soda bottle without asking for help sometimes. But to her, in broad daylight, standing on public sidewalk, that's what he was, a threat. And she said it right to his face. No one stepped in. No one corrected her. Not one of those pristine lawn-owning neighbors who claim to love community and togetherness opened their door or uttered a word. Just Karen and her poison, aimed straight at a child, like a garden hose sprang. Weed killer on anything she didn't plant herself. It wasn't just her words that hurt. It was the weight behind them, the casual ease of it. Like she wasn't even worried about being overheard. Like she knew nothing would happen to her. 'Cause that's the privilege of people like her. They get to rewrite reality with nothing but their tone. She didn't need facts, she didn't need reason. All she needed was the confidence that her voice carried more weight than his existence. And in that moment, it did. He didn't talk about it right away. My son's the kind who lets things sit for a while, lets them harden before he brings them forward. But when he did, it wasn't with tears or anger, was with confusion. Like he was still trying to do the math, still trying to figure out what part of his walk, his posture, his face had translated to danger in her eyes. And there it was, the damage. Not the insult itself, but the seed of self-doubt it planted. Because when someone tells a child they're dangerous, what they're really doing is trying to make them shrink, to question themselves, to carry the guilt of someone else's prejudice like it's their own shadow. And that, to me, is a form of violence. It may not leave bruises, but it cuts deeper than most fists ever could. I thought about going to the HOA, thought about filing a complaint, gathering neighbors, presenting evidence. But the truth is, I already knew what would happen. They'd smile politely. They'd talk about, he said, she said, and miscommunications, and everyone's entitled to feel safe. They wouldn't reprimand her, they'd cover. For her, the board had been propping her up for months now, treating her like some kind of neighborhood sentinel instead of what she really was. A bitter, self-righteous, busybody drunk on her own authority. So, I stayed quiet on the outside. But, inside, something began to build. Not rage, not yet. Something colder, something steadier. A determination that didn't shout or burn it, waited. Planted itself deep like a seed in dry soil, knowing full well its time would come. Because if she saw my son as a threat, then maybe. It was time to show her just how threatening brilliance, kindness, and quiet strength could be. I've always believed in answering cruelty with clarity, in using truth like a spotlight, not a weapon. So I started planning, not for confrontation, but for exposure. Not just to defend my son, but to remind this whole town of the boy they thought they knew, and the one they clearly didn't. Karen. Wanted to draw attention? Fine. I was going to give her a spectacle, one she couldn't look away from. One no one in this HOA would ever forget. There's a moment in every long life where you stop giving folks the benefit of the doubt. It doesn't happen all at once, creeps in quiet, steady like rot behind the drywall. You want to believe that people are good. You want to believe that neighbors mean well, that committees serve fairness, and that reason still matters. But eventually, something snaps. A point gets crossed. And what you once called community starts to look a whole lot like a club you never asked to join. For me, that moment came the day I sat through the HOA's monthly meeting. I didn't go often. Most folks around here didn't. Not until the new board took over and started enforcing rules like we were all in a private military academy. Instead of a peaceful neighborhood where the loudest thing used to be summer cicadas and the smell of coke. And the smell of barbecue meant friendship, not regulation. Still, I went that day. Not to make a scene, just to understand. I wanted to see if the HOA really stood behind what Karen had said about my son. I wanted to see if any of them had the decency to speak up, even just to clarify, or maybe walk it back. Something, anything. But what I got instead was a perfect portrait of cowardice. The meeting started the way they all do, tight smiles. Hollow greetings, the kind of fake cheerfulness that makes your teeth itch. Karen was there, of course, sitting smug as a cat in a sunbeam, sipping from one of those stainless steel tumblers that somehow always signals trouble. I stayed quiet for most of it, listening, watching, taking note of how they moved past her. Complaint about my son without any resistance. The board chair, a man named Greg, with all the spine of a boiled noodle, read the incident. Like it was just a routine report. Suspicious youth seen loitering in the community corridor. Resident issued verbal caution. No escalation recorded. That was it. No mention of his age. No mention of his school uniform. No mention that he lives in the neighborhood and was walking home from school. They used the word loitering, like he was just out there casing houses, like he wasn't a child with a backpack full of homework and a head full of violin melodies. The worst part wasn't what they said. It was the way everyone nodded. The silence, a comfort they all seemed to take in pretending it hadn't gone too far. They didn't just ignore it, they co-signed it, wrapped it in policy, tied a bow on it, and called it safety. That was the moment. That's when something shifted in me. I've never been one for loud protests. I don't storm stages or post Facebook rants, but I do believe in thresholds, and that day they pushed me past mine. It wasn't just about Karen. Anymore, it wasn't even just about my son. It was about the rot in that room. The rot that lets adults pretend they're protecting the community, when really, they're just protecting their comfort. The rot that smiles in your face while signing off on subtle cruelty. The rot that looks at a child like mine and only sees what makes them uneasy, not what makes him exceptional. I left that meeting feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not rage. Rage burns out too fast. No, this was something deeper, heavier. A slow, deliberate fire that didn't rise to the surface but settled low in my gut, warming every thought like a forge heating steel. They wanted to pretend my son was invisible. Fine. They wanted to act like his presence was threatening. Fine. They wanted to erase his kindness, his brilliance, his heart. Fine. But they were about to learn that when you ignore a child's truth long enough, someone's going to put it in. Light so bright you can't look away. I started collecting things the next day. Quietly, methodically, his report cards. All of them. Every single A. Every teacher's comment about his work ethic, his curiosity, his kindness toward classmates. Photos of him at the science fair, blue ribbon still pinned to his chest. A snapshot of him with the school orchestra. Violin tucked under his chin like it was made to fit there. I wasn't collecting them for a scrapbook. This wasn't nostalgia. This was ammunition. I even pulled a note from our fridge. One he'd written himself last year when I'd been laid up with the flu. Don't worry, Dad. I made soup. I'll wake you if I hear anything. I'm proud of you. It broke me a little, reading that again. Not from sadness, but from pride so sharp it hurt. That's who they called a threat. That's who Karen treated like a criminal. I don't cry. Often, life teaches you to stay steady, especially when others are watching. But alone in my office, surrounded by evidence of this boy's quiet greatness, I felt something sacred swell up in me. Not grief. Not even vengeance. Honor, that single quotes as. What it was, I wasn't just going to defend him. I was going to honor him, loudly, publicly, and I was going to use the very same tools Karen and the HOA used to try and shame him: visibility, attention, spectacle. If they wanted control of the sidewalk, fine, they could keep it. I was aiming higher, much higher. The billboard idea came like a whisper. Soft at first, then louder, bolder, until it wasn't just an idea, was a mission. Something sacred. A message not just to Karen, but to every person in that room who looked away. Every neighbor who stayed silent. Every board member who nodded like it was just business as usual. You call my son a threat. I'll make sure everyone in town sees the truth, and I won't need cameras or complaint forms to do it. I'll need something bigger. Some folks seek justice through courts, others take it to the internet. Me, I believe in meeting arrogance with something more permanent. Something that doesn't just bark, but stands tall and stays standing. That's why I chose the Billboard. Not just any billboard either. The biggest one in town. The one right off Highway 9, the first thing people see when they pull into town. The one usually filled with car dealership slogans or election campaign grins. That towering slab of steel and vinyl had been part of the background for years. But now it was about to carry a message this town would never forget. I knew a guy who ran the ad company that leased it. Local man, grew up here like I did. We used to fish the river together in the summers when our backs were stronger and our days longer. I gave him a call, told him I needed it for a week, maybe 2. Told him I didn't want a sale price or a political quote. I wanted truth, and I was willing to pay whatever it cost. He asked what I planned to put on it. I just said, a report card. There was silence for a second. Then, a quiet chuckle on the other end of the line. You're serious? I'm deadly. I sent him the files that afternoon. A scanned copy of my son's most recent report card, every subject marked with a bright, satisfying A. Underneath, I included the teacher's note. Consistently focused, thoughtful, and kind to classmates. A joy to teach. I paired that with a recent photo. My boy holding his science fair trophy, grinning, awkward. The way only a 12-year-old can smile when he's proud but shy about it. And then, just beneath the photo, in bold, all caps white letters, this is who she called a threat. No names, no faces other than my son's. No accusations. Just truth, 10 feet tall and staring down every person driving into town by the following Monday. It was up, and oh, did people notice? The first morning, a few cars slowed down to read it. By noon, folks were pulling over to take photos. Some even got out of their vehicles just to stand beneath it and stare. I heard one man brought his granddaughter by after school to read the whole thing. This, he said, is what real pride looks like. Word spread fast, faster than I thought it would. Facebook lit up first, then the local community group. The image started bouncing between screens like wildfire. Do y'all know who this kid is? Someone posted. Is this real? Is this the same incident? From Maple Drive last week. Suddenly, everyone had questions and none of them were about my son's hoodie or his presence on the sidewalk. They were about Karen. No one said her name outright. That's how small towns work. Accusations carry more weight when they're whispered. But everyone knew. The timing, the location, the phrasing. It didn't take a detective to connect the dots. People started side-eyeing her on dog walks. Neighbors who used to wave started looking the other way. Her social circle shrank faster than a cheap sweater in a hot dryer. And she noticed. Of course she did. I wasn't trying to humiliate her, not directly. I just wanted people to see. To understand. To recognize what happens when quiet cruelty goes unchecked. But public accountability has a way of stinging worse than any insult, especially for someone like Karen, who thrives on being the one in control. Meanwhile, my son started walking home with his head a little higher. He hadn't seen the billboard. Yet, I wanted to keep it a surprise until he could see it in person, until he could feel what it meant. That week, I picked him up from school instead of letting him walk. Drove us out to the edge of town where the highway curves just right. Then the billboard rises against the skyline like a flag planted on principle. When he saw it, he didn't say a word. He just stared. Eyes wide, mouth open. Then he looked at me with this stunned kind of disbelief, like he couldn't quite accept that he was the message. That he was worthy of that kind of love, that kind of defense. It wasn't about proving anything to Karen anymore. It was about giving my boy something she tried to take away. His pride, his sense of place, his belonging. You see, when someone attacks your child's identity, their dignity, They're very right to be seen and respected. They aren't just being rude, they're declaring war on everything you've taught them about self-worth. And I wasn't about to let that declaration stand. The town kept buzzing. The local paper ran a small write-up under the community spotlight section. It didn't name names, but the message was clear. This was a story about standing up, about reclaiming space. One of the editors even messaged me privately. She said she hadn't cried in months until she saw that billboard. It's rare, she wrote, to see kindness fight back without becoming cruelty. That was the whole point, not revenge for the sake of blood, not noise for the sake of ego, but a reckoning loud enough to be heard, bold enough to be remembered, and rooted in truth so solid that no HOA fine, no passive-aggressive email, no smirking neighbor could ever dismantle it. And when Karen drove past it because, of course, she did. You can't avoid that billboard, no matter how hard you try. Hope she finally saw what we'd been trying to tell her all along. That her fear didn't define this community, that her labels didn't stick, and that, no matter how loudly she tried to whisper her judgment, my son's truth was louder. There's a particular kind of silence that comes after the truth's been laid bare. Not the awkward, shifting kind that fills a room when people don't know what to say, but the heavy, reverent silence that falls when folks realize something. Like a cold snap after a long heat wave or the hush right before the first snowfall. It doesn't ask for attention. It commands it. That's the silence that settled over our neighborhood the week the billboard went up. No one knocked on my door to talk about it. No one from the HOA sent a notice. Karen didn't come storming down the sidewalk with her camera and clipboard. And Greg, the spineless board president, didn't offer any phony words about miscommunication or community values. They all went quiet. And that told me everything you see when the truth makes people uncomfortable. Their first instinct isn't to confront, it's to retreat, to slink back into the tall grass and wait it out, hoping things return to normal without them having to change. But what they didn't realize is, there's no going back from a spotlight like that, not when the whole town saw it. The billboard stood tall for 2 solid weeks. And during that time, something remarkable happened. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a quiet shift in how people behaved. Folks I barely knew started nodding at me in the grocery store. The woman who runs the local bakery slipped a note into my bread bag that read, "Your son's got a bright future. Thank you for raising him right." Even the sheriff, who I've always pegged as more handshake than backbone, stopped me outside the hardware store and said, without meeting my eyes, "That was well said." But the most telling shift was how people treated her garden. Before all this, she strutted around like a school principal in a town without students, barking about lawn heights, barking about cars parked too long, barking about kids playing basketball too close to her driveway. But suddenly, her leash didn't reach as far. The air around her changed. Folks didn't engage. Some stopped waving. Others just turned away. Her little social circle, the tight-knit group of HOA enablers who treated her like the queen of suburban compliance, began to fray at the edges. I heard whispers that she tried to file a formal complaint about the billboard being defamatory, that she marched into an HOA meeting demanding I be fined for targeting a resident. But the board, sensing the shifting wind, passed the buck. Said it was outside their jurisdiction. Said if she had an issue, she'd have to take it up with the town council. And that was that. No lawsuit. No apology. Just the slow, silent collapse of the little tower she'd built out of arrogance and paper-thin authority. I never celebrated out loud, didn't throw a party or post a gloating message online. That's not how folks like me operate. We don't need applause, we just need peace. And peace finally started to settle back in. My son kept walking home from school, right down the same street, same backpack, same earbuds. But now he walked taller. And people noticed. One day, the retired veteran who lives 3 houses down stopped him to shake his hand. Didn't say much, just a firm grip, a proud nod. But that meant more to me than any Facebook comment ever could. I even saw Karen watching once. From behind her blinds, I could feel her eyes as we walked by, but she didn't come out. Not this time. Not ever again. As far as I can tell, and I didn't need her to see. Revenge isn't about breaking someone. Not real revenge. The kind that satisfies, the kind that lasts, comes not from screaming louder or sinking lower, but from standing taller. From refusing to let bitterness shape you the way ignorance shaped them. It comes from making the world see what they tried to hide. Karen wanted to make my son small. I made sure the world saw how big he truly is, and now they do. That billboard eventually came down, replaced by an ad for some law firm promising to fight for your rights. Funny in a way, because that space had already done its job. It had already fought for something real. And it had already won. The message lives on, maybe not in vinyl, but in memory, in conversation, in awareness, because even if folks stop talking about it, they won't forget it. They won't forget the boy with the violin and the straight A's. The one who was called a threat and answered with quiet strength. The one whose face lit up a town. And I won't forget either. I won't forget how quickly people can turn on a child who doesn't fit their mold. I won't forget how systems, hoes, neighbors, even silence itself can become accomplices too. Harm when left unchecked, and I won't forget how one act of dignity, bold, unapologetic, visible, can shift the tide. My son still doesn't know the full weight of what happened. Not yet. One day he'll understand. One day, when he's older and ready, I'll sit him down and tell him the whole thing, how they tried to shrink him. And how he answered with something too big to ignore. But for now, he just knows one thing, that his father believed in him, loud enough for the whole town to hear. And sometimes that's all a kid really needs.